Hello YouTube, I'm Toby. Now this right here is what today's video will be about. This is an old HP Compaq DC 5850, the small form factor version. And you may be wondering why there's a CPU and a graphics card on top of the computer. This is actually because I recently upgraded this computer right here. And this right here is the old CPU that was in here, and this is the Athlon X2 4450 Bravo. It's a dual core CPU. I can't really remember the clock speed of it, but it wasn't really that high. And right next to it we have the GT220 right here. This is a small form factor card, and it was the one that was in here beforehand. Alright, so what is in this computer right now? Let me show you. Alright, so this right here is what the insides of this computer looks like. Right here we have our intake fan. There are actually only 3 fans in this system, and that's in the intake fan, the power supply, and in the graphics card. Now right here we have the CPU socket, and it is an AM2 socket, and right in here right now I have an AMD Phenom 2 X2 560. Now this Phenom processor I had laying around, and I was actually curious to see if it would actually go in here. And surprisingly, even though it's an AM3 CPU, it actually fit in the AM2 socket. I do believe it may actually be an AM2 Plus socket, but it didn't say, it just said AM2. Either way, when I first put the CPU in here, it didn't show up. Well, it did show up as unknown processor clocked at 0.8 GHz. So I actually had to download and upgrade the new BIOS for the system, and it is showing up fine now. It is a dual core processor with 2 threads, and it's clocked somewhere around 3 GHz. And over here in the corner we have an ASUS built Radeon HD 5570. We also have 6 GB of RAM. When I first got the system it only had 4, I believe, so I decided to install well, an extra 2 GB. Well, we also have a DVD drive and a power supply, and underneath these there's there's actually 2 hard drives in here. Alright, so if you have actually, if you're subscribed to my channel, you may know that I've had this, have been playing around and actually upgraded this PC once before. That's when it got the dual core Athlon as opposed to the 1 core Athlon that was actually in here when I first managed to get this system. Now also when I first got this thing, it belonged to a smoker, so everything pretty much just stank like smoke. Every time you turn it on, the entire climate in your apartment would pretty much resemble that of a smoker's lung. But I have managed to clean it up as best I can. You can still feel it in the air once it's running, but ultimately it's not an issue anymore. Alright, so we are currently in the BIOS, and as you can see it is picking up the Phenom processor, and as I said it was clocked around 3 GHz, it's actually 3.3 GHz, and it is picking up our 6 GB of RAM. Now something I noticed when I started playing around with this computer is that it got really hot on the CPU and the GPU, and it didn't really seem like the fans were speeding up when I tried to counter this issue. So I actually had to go into the BIOS and manually adjust the fan speed. Let me just, it's actually on the lowest now. Let me just turn it up high so you can hear what that sounds like. Now I usually have it around here. This is just the second slot. It is a little bit loud, but it does keep the processor at a comfortable heat level. Alright, so I figured it's time to benchmark this computer. Although I will have to say we are running a 720p display, and I will have Steam running in the background during the entire testing. Now I haven't actually, I have benchmarked it a little bit, but I haven't really played anything on here. I was kind of waiting for, to videotape it so that, we'll experience this together. Now I figured we'd start off with a synthetic benchmark, and we're running a Cinebench R15, and you can really see that Phenom processor work its magic. Alright, so the Cinebench test has run its course, and we ended up with a score of 152 Cinebench points. Alright, so next up is the Resident Evil 6 benchmarking tool. I've set all the settings to low with anti-aliasing at FXAA. 2476. Well, according to the game itself, it may work, but it may also considerably slow down. Yeah, I don't doubt that. Alright, so our first not synthetic benchmark is Counter-Strike Global Offensive. And we are playing offline and against bots, so this may strain the CPU just a little bit. But we are seeing above 60 frames per second, so it's actually not too bad. I am actually having to play kind of awkwardly right now, seeing as the camera is actually right in front of the screen. Dang, I can't see my crosshairs, but it does seem that Csgo is somewhat playable. There's a little bit of stutter every now and then, but for the most part we seem to be around 60 to 100 frames per second, so that is a pleasant surprise. Now Csgo is not that difficult to play. It came out in 2012, so most PCs with, well, even a low-end graphics card actually should be able to play this. Actually, even if you have a old processor. Kinda sad I never managed to try this on the old Athlon, but who knows, maybe I might do that someday. Now, even though we are running playable frame rates, I will have to say this. We are running on 720p with the lowest possible settings. And I am doing anti-aliasing, but it's the lowest anti-aliasing that I could put it on without turning it off. Now Subnautica is actually playing a lot smoother than I had originally anticipated. We are running just above 30 frames per second, which actually makes it seem playable at low depths. But once again, we will have to go on and compromise with your graphics settings. And the game actually gave me a warning that the GPU would not be able to play the game, but it is looking like it actually can play the game. But yeah, I could easily imagine that once you get into the deeper parts of this ocean right here, that you would see some pretty horrific frame drops. Alright, so unsurprisingly, Age of Empires 2 is running very well on the system. We are continually hitting 60 frames per second, which I think this game actually may be capped at, but I'm not entirely sure. Now, I may be a bit too optimistic right now, but I figured I'd give PUBG a go. Now, when we're only in the lobby, we are getting just 15 frames per second, so I'm expecting 10 tops in the actual game. Alright, so we have the settings right here, and I've pretty much just set everything to very low. I don't think I'll get much use of this actually. I don't even think I'll get into the actual game, but let's see what happens. Alright, so the most amazing thing just happened. I actually made it into the pre-game. I honestly didn't expect I would even get in the actual server. I thought I'd be kicked or thrown out or lose connection or something. But we are running around 20 frames per second, so this just might be somewhat playable actually. Alright, so we've just exited the aircraft, and as we're dropping from the sky, it seems that our frame rate is also dropping. We're actually getting close to 30 frames per second in the airplane, and now we're at 19, so 18, and it's definitely going downhill, but let's see what happens once we actually land. Wow, that's so laggy, man. Yeah, I can pretty much call this unplayable already right now. And there's someone over there. Let's see if we can just go die. Oh man. I don't even have any sound, so I can't even hear what's going on in there. Alright, let's go in here and see what we can get from there. Oh, seems there's a pistol right here. Wow, oh, alright. Yeah, what did you expect? Alright, so PUBG, surprisingly enough, it would actually load, but unsurprisingly, it is in no way playable on this system. Now, I really want to be done with this video, but apparently this computer needs to install 181 updates. And the other day it had, what, 190 something. So far I think I've spent 4, 5 or 6 hours total waiting for this computer to install updates. Alright, so the computer finally managed to finish its installs, and I managed to shut it down without screwing anything up. Now before we end this video, I thought I'd go into the pros and cons of this particular system. Now one of the pros of this system is that it's a small form factor, maybe not that small for modern standards, but for what it is, it's a small form factor and it doesn't really take up that much space. You can hide this easily under a monitor or a TV. Now spare parts for this system is relatively cheap, since I have a feeling that there is a ton of these computers out there. So if this one breaks, well, you might as well just buy a new one, or well, just buy a new one and switch out the parts that broke. Also, this computer has 8 USB ports. I'm not sure what type they are. I think they're 2.0, but I'm not entirely sure. Also, if you go to HP's website, they have a lot of good drivers for this. I actually found the latest BIOS for this thing. Well, it was back from 2012, but I did manage to install the newest BIOS on here from HP's website. Also, something like this is still good for basic tasks like email, web browsing, basic word processing, and Excel spreadsheets. And if you feel up for a little light gaming, this system will definitely be fine for that as well. And generally, these old cases are very fun to tinker with, because you kind of got to get creative if you want to do something about that, but we'll get to that a bit later. Now the cons of this system, and there are many of them, is first off, this thing is loud. And if it isn't loud, it gets really hot. I measured the temperature on the motherboard and it reached, I can't believe it's the north or the south bridge, but it had reached almost 60 degrees Celsius when I had the fan turned down all the way. Also, this one smells. It's not as bad as it was when I first got it. Like I said earlier, I cleaned this thing up pretty good, and I think I've managed to remove the smell as best I can. I really don't notice it that much anymore, but then again, I've been airing out and I have a large living room to do this in. I could imagine if you have a small room, you run this for a long time and it gets hot, I think it might actually start to smell a little bit. Also, this thing is old. The hardware is slow and outdated, but if you can live with that, it's actually not that bad. Also, this thing is, I wouldn't say ugly, but definitely not modern looking. It's got no sleek lines or anything, it's just a basic little box. Also, there are no native USB 3.0 ports on this case, so if you want that, you'll have to buy an expansion card. Alright YouTube, so I hope you enjoyed this little video. My plans for this system is that I'm going to try and upgrade it to the best of my abilities. I'm going to see if I can get a cheap GT730 or something to put in here, maybe a quad-core Phenom processor, and maybe some more RAM, just so we can see just how much this system can actually become capable of doing. Because as it stands right now, although it's good enough for what it is, everything can always get better, and with something as old as this, there is a limitation to how powerful you can make it, but I definitely intend to find that limit. But thank you very much for watching this video.